I played an NES game called Legacy of the Wizard recently, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. So I ended up making an editor for it called LOTW Tool. It's free and open source, and you can download it. There should be a link in the description below. But basically, you just open up your Legacy of the Wizard NES ROM, and you can start editing it right away. So here in the maps view, you can see an overview of the entire dungeon. You can zoom this in if you want a closer look, but it starts at a size that's kind of at a glance that fits on your screen. And you just double click a room that you want to edit. The room also you can zoom in if you want, if you need to have a better view. But the basic editing action, you right click on a tile to grab it, and then left click to draw with that tile. It's pretty simple. But there's also, every room has a palette of 64 tiles, and here you can see everything that's available, not just what you could maybe right click on, but right clicking to just select a tile and copy it somewhere else is kind of the easy thing that you'd probably be doing most of the time. So it's this grid of 64 by 12 tiles. Some of them are special, like the first tile is always a ladder. Wherever you place that, it's a climbable ladder. It doesn't have to look, they don't have to look the same, but they have to be in this position. Here's a door. If a door has a shop or an inn header over it, then you can go into it and it'll become an inn or a shop. If it doesn't have one of these over it, it won't work. You can't go into it. This is a locked door. You need a key to get through. I don't think there's any on this screen, but you could add one if you wanted. You could add one of whatever color you want. So every tile has 4 possible colors. If you don't like the colors, you can right click on them and just edit them. So we could make this like, oops, I'll get to that in a moment, but here we can make the background more green and less yellow if you want. So those doors I just placed, they'd be easier to see if you use, a color that makes them stand out. Usually you don't want to edit these colors because that's the status bar at the top of the screen. There's a portrait of Selena. So if you've played the game, once you get enough crowns, these have a special teleport function. The shop and inn I explained. So that's 6 special tiles. Everything after that is background. This could look any way you want, but as long as they're in this position in the palette, they're all open. So you'll see down here there's a description of the tile. So if I click on this, I call it enter. This is called a door. This is called shop. If they say open, it's just a background. And then finally right here at the last 2 rows are all your solid tiles. So the first one's a spike. So that's special. That's always a spike that damages you. And the second last one is always this block, which is movable with the glove or the rod, or the mattock can destroy them. So those 2 are special, and the rest of these are just solid. And for some reason, there's always a treasure chest at the end, but I don't think it does anything special. I think it's just a solid block. So they'll all say solid when you hover over them. You can also see that down here in the map editor. So that's the basics about editing the tiles. The other thing you will find is that, here, let's just zoom in on the inn for a moment. So here's the inn over here. Here's the inn sign. We can actually edit the meta tile. So the meta tile is this like 16 by 16 pixel tile that you place on the map, but it's actually made up of 4 tiles. So this is kind of like the raw NES graphics that are loaded for this map. They're called CHR for character. But everything's like an 8 by 8 block. So you'll see a lot of stuff is arranged in like a 16 by 16 pixel rectangle, like the doors, all one thing. Here's the princess, but, well, like the inn, here's one half of the sign, but the other half is way over here. So we could actually, change part of the inn, or I don't know. Here's the tile we could replace it with. So now we've changed how the inn looks. It has a very different looking sign there. However, this will still operate as an inn because it's still in the inn slot in the palette. So the meta tile page, these are actually usually shared by several maps. So here we should get into the map properties. So every room has a whole bunch of data associated with it. Like you can choose the music for this room. There's a byte that controls the music. You can read down here what things do. Actually, the secret tiles are worth explaining. So the secret tile, what happens is there's one special tile per map that you can choose. You can choose it to be any of these tiles. And what it means is whenever you touch a tile that is this, it gets replaced with the replacement tile. So here it's like this gravelly background. So whenever you touch any of these, it's replaced with the gravelly background. And actually you should notice something here. There's 4 tiles here. I should actually show this in the tile palette. So there's 4 tiles here that actually just look like the same block. There's nothing stopping you from assigning the same tiles to the same thing in the meta tile thing, but here this is an open block and here this is a solid block. I don't know why they made 2 solid blocks that are the same, but that's what they have. But this means it's already an open space. It just happens to look like a solid block deceptively. But when you touch it, it gets replaced by this, which is an open block. Like you can replace a solid block with an open block. In that case, you have to push into it to make it change. But if it's an open block already, all you have to do is fall into it and it'll change. So there's a little bit different behavior there. You could also make an open block replace with a solid block. So like you walk into it and it blocks you out. There's a lot of different behaviors that are possible. And there's weird things. Like I said, you can't go in a door unless there is a shop or an inn above it. There's a room where when you touch the inn is the secret block and it gets replaced with the shop block. So you touch it and the inn changes into a shop. You have all sorts of behaviors like that, but you only get 1 replacement per room, which is kind of interesting. And finally, there's the block replace. And that's because when you move a block, it moves over something else and it leaves a gap behind. So this is just what gets filled in. So here you can see it's just that gravel tile again. But, once it's moved somewhere, it'll be over top these bricks or something. If you push it again, it'll just replace with what it originally was. But you need a tile for the hole that will be under a block, and that'll be the same tile for this whole room. So that's what that one does. So if you have a shop, here you can pick an item. So here's a Matic. You can set a price. So every shop has 2 items. There's just 1 shop definition per room. You could have many shops, but they'll all have the same items. The teleport is for the Princess Selena portraits. So this will give you a map coordinate and then a location for it to go. I'll show that in a moment. The meta tile page is what you're seeing here. So there's different meta tile pages. This is hard to change actually, because so not only do you have this page that assigns every tile to 4 different blocks like this, you also have these CHR pages, which are like the underlying graphics that are loaded. And they're these 2 things are connected to each other. And the thing is, like many rooms in the dungeon will use the same graphics and use the same meta tiles. So if you change one of these meta tiles, it'll change it in several rooms at once. So just a warning there. The easiest way is just to edit them as you see them. But just be aware, if you change meta tiles, or if you start editing the graphics, they'll affect more than one location, most likely. So you can change the page. Here you can select, so I can change the graphics, but obviously since there's a different meta tile page, they won't automatically look like something good, but you can assign them any way you want here. So there's two, each of these is a 2 kilobyte page, but together they make up what you see here in the meta tile editor. You can also right click here to select them. And finally, you have the enemy sprite set. So there's all these 1 kilobyte pages. Each of them has 4 enemies on them. So there's basically 4 enemies allowed per room for visual looks to enemies. And I'll explain enemies a bit later. So when you're on the title screen, you get a demonstration that plays, and basically it just picks a random room and a random location, and then it picks an appropriate family member for that room, and then it just makes them kind of move around erratically for a little bit to kind of demonstrate the game. So it has this set of flags for like which family members can appear in these demonstrations. So here, because it's kind of Zamon's dungeon, they've made it so only Zamon will appear here. If you're watching the title screen, kind of a tracked mode thing. Here's the treasure. You can make the treasure disappear if you want. You can set its contents. You can make it a bread or a scroll, or the bouncy shoes or whatever. The X and Y coordinates, you don't really need to edit those here. What you can do is put this into item mode, and then you can just drag items around. You can drag the monsters around. I'll show item mode in just a second. But yeah, you can right click on an item, and that brings up this same window that you were just looking at, but for the treasure. But this is where you can edit the treasure contents. However, if you right click on a monster, you'll get a different property window. So that's the item editor. And here, so you have the colors for monsters. This is color 3. So if we wanted to change the color of that monster, we can just change that here. Note that usually several monsters will share the same color. So here I've changed that one and that one. They don't have unique. There's only 4 different colors available, and actually the first 2 are always the same. Like this one is always for items, and this one is always replaced by the character. So there's really only 2 different colors you can use for enemies, unless you want to use the item color, which is kind of always available as well. So you can choose the appearance. So you choose the kind of first sprite, and you can choose what they look like when they die. You could actually, make a monster that looks like whatever your currently selected player is, or maybe like their weapon if you want, but they're kind of all available here. You can set their hit points, how much they damage you when you touch them. This enemy looks like they don't actually damage you, which is kind of interesting. That one does 2 damage. So that one does 0 damage. That is interesting. Never realized. Okay, so enemies have behavior. This is not, so the graphics aren't like how they look is not tied to how they behave. There's 8 different behaviors here, and you can just kind of pick one. Any of the enemies could be any of these things. It's kind of interesting. You can set a speed and their position. Again, it's easier just to drag them around. In the horizontal, they are snapped to a tile. Maybe better if you could see how that changes. In the vertical, you can actually go to a specific pixel. Here you can hold shift, and you could put one halfway between the tile, but that's not very useful in general. You just kind of want to put them on a tile. See, otherwise, you could put them halfway into a tile, or I don't really know what happens if you do that. But you can, if you want. There's another byte here that controls something about enemies, and I have not been able to figure out what this is. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. So that's basic enemy editing. So I guess I should show the teleport. So here we have, let's go back to the original zoom. So we have a Princess Selena portrait here. As I said, there is in the map properties, here's a teleport location. So it says 3, 2. You can look that up in the map. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2. So that's where it's teleporting to. But it also has an XY location. So the X is a grid coordinate. You can actually see the grid coordinate down here. So 2E and 6. The Y coordinate is always a pixel coordinate. So usually these are in hexadecimal because it makes it easier, because every tile is 16 pixels. So this will always be 0 for the Y coordinate. But I guess you could make him teleport kind of halfway in a tile if you wanted. But 2E and 6, so that teleports right to here. So that's how that works. If there's a Princess Selena tile, it can be activated in the usual way. If you've played through the game, you know how they work. So that's editing a map. Oh, actually, also you can. So there's a terrain mode and an items mode. Terrain mode is you can draw the background. Items mode is you can move the items around. You right click on one and it'll bring up the properties for that item. There can be 12 on the screen, and if everything's zeros, that means they're empty. You can actually use the delete item command here to empty one if you want to get rid of one that exists. If you want to create a new one, I made a control click that makes like a default monster. So if you hold control and click, and this is basically like the first creature in the game. However, it'll be using whatever sprite is loaded for that. So it's sort of like how the meta blacks in the first room behave. But you can create that creature and then edit it to your heart's content. Change its hit points, change its damage, change how it acts, whatever you want. So other than that, there's a couple of other things. So the CHR I mentioned, this is basically the NES graphics, like how the hardware sees the graphics. So you can look at all these 1 kilobyte pages. If you want to edit one, you can just click on it. And there's a rudimentary pixel editor in here, so you can just draw. And that works, but what I'd really recommend doing if you want to start editing these things is right-click and then export it to a PNG. And then you can edit it with whatever graphics editor you want. Or if you have like NES tools, there's the standard CHR format. You can just export it and open it with something that works with that stuff. You will notice down here that these look kind of jumbled. There are 2 modes. There's the background mode and the sprite mode. Any CHR page can be used for both, but they're organized differently. So you just switch modes, and now you can see all these really nice character sprites. And these things will be jumbled now. And there's no real, like, because any of them could be either. You have to manually select the mode and just kind of, if it looks jumbled, it's probably the wrong mode. That's basically it. But if you're using one for background, it will be in background mode, basically. And if you're using one for sprites, it'll be in sprite mode. So yeah, that's where all the graphics are stored in the ROM. So here's credits. Credits are pretty easy to edit. It's just ASCII text, and this is what it's going to look like in the game. It's this big scrolling thing. So you just type what you want, and this will be in the credits in the game. The other part of the credits, okay, so I have this global editor. I'll talk more about this in a moment, but the credits actually have a 4-color palette for all those tiles. So the text here is white, but you could make it green if you want. And there's actually 2 other colors, which you won't see because all of the graphics for the credits are black and white. But here, let's we'll just put like a little smiley face under 6 and 7 here, and you'll see that these can show up in the credits in different colors. So you see I've made it green. If you put the letters 6 and 7, you can see a little bit of the two other colors that I picked over there. Oop. So we have that orange, and I guess I picked another green. But basically, like, the credits could show more than just text, but this is what you have available from your ASCII characters. So you can assign anything you want. Anything you're not using, you could draw stuff on it and use it. There's also the title screen. So this is kind of similar to the map editor. You can right-click, and then you can draw with the thing you right-clicked on. I could take a piece of the Z here and draw like that. You can show a grid here. Every 16 by 16 area has a single color palette, so it's one of these 4 palettes. These 4 are for sprites, so these won't affect the background, but these 4 you can draw with the background. So I could take this one, which will correspond to this color, and I can draw wherever I want. But notice if I draw like in the middle here, it affects all 4 of these tiles at once. So that's something to keep in mind when you're making NES background graphics. Colors are on a coarser kind of grid than the tile by tile. And also you can hold shift, and then you can just draw color instead of replacing the tiles, because otherwise the tile comes with its color. And the other thing you can do with the title screen editor is you can export a standard NES name table format. There's a really cool tool called NES Screen Tool, which can read those, and maybe there's other NES editors which can deal with them. But you could edit it there if you want more features. This is a very rudimentary editor, where you can just click on a tile and click on a thing. You can change the assigned CHR pages if you want, but probably don't need to do that since there's a dedicated one for the title screen. There's also this unused screen. I put this in here. It's in exactly the same data format as the title screen, but it's not used for anything. It just seems to be a leftover thing that they left in the game. I guess they were working on an original title screen and then abandoned it, but never deleted it. However, they must have deleted the graphics that were assigned to it, like the CHR, so it doesn't look like it's using the right tiles because it isn't. If this is interesting to you, you can kind of puzzle through the data. Maybe you can make up your own CHR that works for this and restores the original idea for a title screen, but that's kind of a speculative project that I'm not going to undertake myself. So it's just here if you're curious. You can edit it, but it won't change anything because it's not actually used by the game. And finally we have the dragon. So the dragon is kind of special. The dragon is stored as a regular map. And you wouldn't really... There's not much to edit here. You probably don't want to edit the tiles on the map, though you can if you want. But what you'll find is its meta tile page is very important. So we'll just open up the tile palette so you can see that. So there's actually just 2 dragon sprites here. The colors here probably don't matter. I don't think it really copies the color. But I think it's really only these 2 that matter. But what you'll find is there's 8 meta tile pages, each with 2 graphics on it. So the actual tiles on the map don't change, but the meta tile page is changed, and that animates the dragon. So you can see all of the dragon's graphics are in here. So if you wanted to edit them, you would edit these meta tiles. You would right-click here and choose New Tiles. And here's the 2 CHR pages. You can see them in the selector here. That all the dragon art belongs on. So this is the stuff you want to edit. And you probably don't want to touch the map. There's also some items on this map with some kind of weird data in them. You probably don't want to change that if you're messing with a dragon, but otherwise, all the graphics are here in the meta tile. So it goes up to from hexadecimal 10 to 17, and that's all of them. So once you get to 18, it's something else. So that's if you want to mess with the dragon. Actually, I should show. So on the map, there's another 2 rows here. The bottom row is the boss rooms, so they aren't really part of the main map. They're kind of disconnected. The bosses are, putting it in item mode here, they are made up of 4 pieces each, which is kind of interesting. And then you'll also find that there's a couple of fireballs. So I don't know how much of this stuff you can change or how much is kind of hard-coded by the game, but that is how the bosses are constructed. They're made out of 4 regular enemies, just kind of stuck together. And you can actually see their hit points and their damage, so like part of it is editable at least. And finally there's these kind of 4 special rooms. So this is all the shops. That's kind of straightforward. This is the inventory screen. I don't know why there's a bread item up here. It doesn't really display in the game, but the data shows a bread item. I don't know. It's just funny. And then like half the room is Maddox for no reason. I guess it's just not used, so it doesn't matter. You have the home. So this is another kind of special area of the map, but it is just another room, more or less. And here's the inside of the house and the inn. There is only one inn, and you'll notice it has the wrong graphics. And this is just how the map data shows things, but you can change the meta tile page to 1F, and that's the one for inns. And now you can see the inn, and you can edit it. And now these 3 look wrong, but that's fine. While you're editing the inn, just have that meta tile. So you can undo anything. Here we can set back to what they should be. Undo is global, so you have like 3 windows. You can undo kind of like in any window. It will undo the last change. All the changes are just kind of globally affecting the ROM. So if you do something in this window and then hit undo over here, it'll change whatever the last change was. It's not window specific. These rooms have a blue color over here, and it doesn't show up in game, so I don't know how that gets fixed, but it's just kind of weird. I don't know why that is, but it doesn't seem to matter. So I haven't really gone through the global properties, but these are things that affect the whole game. That's what global means. So you have like how much life you get from a bread pickup, how much gold you get from finding a gold bag, how much damage poison does to you. You can completely edit the starting set of items if you think the player should have some things from the get-go. You can, so the credits palette I already showed, and we have stats for every single family member. You can change their colors, like say we want Pochi to be blue, we can, or let's make Pochi purple. So we can change those colors to purple, and we'll see in a moment. We can make Pochi jump very high. We can make him jump as high as Lil by putting in 26 there. The strength, so the jump, the strength, I think the range, I think you can see all those on the inventory screen. Actually, they should show up here. Strength, jump, and distance. Shots is actually a hidden stat, but Pochi can fire 5 shots at once. Lil can fire 3 at once, but like Zaman could only fire 1 at a time. So you can actually edit that and be able to fire faster with those characters. You can also change like what items they can equip. I've just put this in binary rows, but it's exactly the same order as the inventory screen. So that's pretty much that. And finally, if you want to test stuff, and this is really important, so I recommend when you go to test things, turn on this cheat. I put a cheat that just sets all your starting items to 4 of each, so you can test anything you want. You don't need to gather any items to get going. Probably give yourself some keys. But you can just toggle this on and off. So this was just a quick way to set them all to 4 or all of them to 0. Which I thought would help testing a bit faster. And the other thing I suggest you do is just copy this ladder and put it right next to the entrance to the house, just so you don't, if you played the game, you're familiar with like this long trek back into the dungeon. I tried to figure out how to move this, but it's tied to a bunch of stuff in a bunch of different places in the game. Like I could make it move in some ways, but like there's like the ending cutscene and some other things where you'll come back out here, so you can't really move this ladder. I couldn't find a way to practically do that. But you can add an extra ladder temporarily while you're testing, and it just gets you into the dungeon that much faster. But basically, so all you have to do, so you edit some stuff. Maybe you want to put some shadows under it to make it look nice, but I'll let you figure out how to do that on your own. But what we can do is hold Control, Alternate, and just click on the spot in the dungeon where you want to go. And what happens is it will save the ROM and run it in whatever your associated thing with NES files is. So probably your favorite emulator. Here it's opened in Mason for me. You can see the edited title page that we made. And I'll just click Start. And we'll take Pochi. We can see we have purple Pochi now. We can take whatever items we feel like. And here is our quick ladder down to the dungeon. So that's all it takes to start up. And here we are, right exactly where I clicked on that map. And you can just start testing right from there to see how this room works. Obviously, we haven't edited much else in this room, but that's the testing workflow. So because testing saves the ROM immediately, you could get a state where you've accidentally saved the ROM or it's always entering this room at the start, and you don't really want that. So I have a little in the global properties panel. This will become false. Start location patch removed. You can just set it back to true, and it will kind of sanitize the ROM and put that back so that the dungeon starts at the start again. Just in case you ever need to revert that. And by the way, like all the changes you've made, even if you save the file, here in the file menu, there's a revert to opened, which will go right back to the file as you first opened it for this session. Doesn't matter how many times you've saved it, it just takes back all the changes. And then you could save it from there, and it's basically you've undone all the work that you've done in the session, even though you've probably saved it in between in testing. There's also a save and run if you just want to save and like run from the beginning or wherever. So that's basically the whole editor. The title screen editor I thought was important, just because if you make changes to this game, like you should put your name on the title screen, maybe in the credits, just to let people know when they open the ROM that this is something different. This is something special that you made. So that's basically it. It also works on the Japanese version of the game, which is called Dragon Slayer 4. There's not much difference between the two versions of the game. I think the map might be identical. I'm not sure. I haven't done a direct byte-by-byte comparison, but I'm not really aware of any differences between the two versions, except for just some text changes, like one being in Japanese and one being in English. You'll see the credits are a little different, especially at the ending. There's this reference to Quintet, which people have speculated about, but I think it predates the formation of the company Quintet. So it's just sort of a name that was floating around at the time. I'm not sure of all the details there, but it's just funny that that's there. And here in the North American version, you see, Broderbund, the publisher, Falcom, the developer. But here you can see this is the Dragon Slayer 4 title screen. So this was from a series of games in Japan rather than just being a one-off thing. But something really interesting that I found. So it works on both versions because they're so close. It wasn't hard to make the editor just work on both. I found this ROM hack that there was an MSX2 version. So I haven't made an editor for the MSX versions of the game. So there's a couple of other platforms this game was on. But somebody made a ROM hack that transferred like everything about the MSX2 version, which is a little bit different, over to the Famicom version. So you have this, you can see the different maps, like a lot of different color choices. There's these kind of like orange and purple everywhere. I really like this boat, which you can compare. This is how it looked in North America, and this is how they kind of redrew it for the MSX2 version. It kind of looks like wood covered with moss. Which is kind of really neat. So it even works on ROM hack versions. As far as I know, everything works. If someone like ROM hacked the code significantly, it might have some incompatibilities, but I haven't noticed anything that breaks in the editor yet with this ROM hack. I don't know if there are any other Legacy of the Wizard ROM hacks out there, but this tool should potentially work on any of them that haven't changed the map formats too much. And that's basically it. So if you want to try this out, it's free, it's open source. You will need to provide your own ROM, but I'm not going to tell you where to get those. I'm sure you can figure that out. And the tool itself you can download. There should be a link below. It's on GitHub, called LOTW Tool, Legacy of the Wizard Tool. And I'm really excited to see what people do with this. So please enjoy editing Legacy of the Wizard.